I'm here with Keith Patton, Development Manager at Marker, a digital agency in Auckland, and we're going to talk about his Windows Phone 7 apps. Hey Keith, so you've developed several applications. Can you tell me about them?
Well, I have written, at Marker we've written 3 applications. They are the Air New Zealand MPass application, which is an application for people travelling in New Zealand to get barcodes for their flights and able to scan that at the gate, and also be able to log in with their AirPoints login and see the flights that are upcoming and add additional passenger information via the booking number. Just a handy travel app. That's currently number 9 in the Windows Phone 7 marketplace in New Zealand. So that's done quite well. The second one is Yellow New Zealand. So the Yellow Pages have a company here in New Zealand, and this application is because of the lack of local content at the moment through the Bing services with the Windows Phone. This is a very popular app at the moment. It's currently number 4 in the marketplace, and it allows users to have location-based search of businesses and people. So you can put in what you're searching for and where you're searching for, or it'll use your current location, or you can search for people as well. And it gives you a bunch of information about the businesses, such as opening hours, which is quite useful, and you're able to get directions and save the directions of how to get to the businesses. And it's just one of those apps that you tend to use on a sort of semi-daily basis now to find things in and around New Zealand. We're finding that that's doing quite well in America as well, and in fact Germany, where people are travelling to New Zealand. It's actually had more downloads outside of New Zealand than New Zealand itself, so some of the reviews are quite surprising and positive.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and the last one is a sort of half personal, half Marker project, which is a game called Alpha Jacks, which is a turn-by-turn based word game. It's one of the few, we didn't realise it was going to be, but it is one of the few sort of applications on the marketplace that utilises push notifications and allows players to play each other solely over the internet. So it's a little bit unique in that respect, although it's quite similar to some applications that are on other platforms. So we tried to utilise some of the design paradigms in Windows Phone with the Metro design and the pivots and things like that, but just to give a really good, we wanted to have a really good, strong multiplayer game for the platform to help people, not feel like that there was a lack of something on the platform, because it's one of our favourite games on other platforms. So we wanted to make sure that we were all going to buy Windows Phones that we were going to play. So it's been
Awesome. So how did you find the dev process, the actual process of going from maybe concept through to development on Windows Phone 7?
I would say it was probably one of the most enjoyable phases of my development career, actually. The excitement around worked on previous betas of .NET and .NET itself, but I think there was something really fun and exciting about actually getting apps on a mobile device. I hadn't worked with Windows Mobile previously, and the whole gelling of Silverlight, .NET and the device itself, even though for most of it I was working with an emulator, but was very exciting. So for the most part, whilst there are well documented things that are missing in the APIs, the level of control and power that we were able to get over, you need to be able, for example, to create a game that had network services, push notifications, and very strong abilities to work with data and apply that data onto the user interface using data binding in Silverlight was surprisingly quick in comparison to looking with some of our other developers looking at, hey, how would you do this on iOS or other platforms, that there would have been more work in that respect. So that was really good. In terms of the controls, it took a while for some of the final controls to ship around Pivot and Panorama, but there was plenty of activity from developers on Codeplex supplying sample pivots. We primarily used the pivots, and then it was a very easy job to switch those out and to replace them with the final versions once they became available. So the control framework is something that every .NET developer is familiar with. And Microsoft have been very good at supplying those in time for go live, so we had a pretty good experience really overall.
I understand you use a similar architecture across all of your apps. Can you tell us a bit about that? Maybe go a bit in depth on what frameworks you use and how you set your apps up, what's unique about them?
Yeah, I will. I'll probably come across a little bit schizophrenic in my advice here, which is initially the excitement. I would not like to discourage developers from downloading the tools and just hacking their way to a little bit of joy with the development and not worrying too much about, because I wouldn't have done anything if I'd have thought about architecture in the first few weeks. It's just really just getting to play with it. But eventually, after time, once we seriously got into the game, you, as you would with a website and learning about architectures with ASP.NET, it became apparent that there was a need to have some clean separation between the presentation layer and the controlling aspects of the view model and the back-end services and database. So we looked at the patterns that were available for things like Windows Presentation Foundation, and they started with MVVM Lite as a framework to provide the layers of separation and reduce the amount of manual coding that needed to be done to wire these things up. So really it was about making the code more maintainable, more understandable and more testable. And so we eventually switched to a framework called Calibre Micro, which is very similar to MVVM Lite, but we felt just reduced the most amount of code and had the maximum amount of fairy dust to make things automagically happen.
So what would you say was the key difference between MVVM Lite and Calibre Micro?
Calibre Micro just seemed a little bit more mature from the original Calibre framework. The convention, it has a very conventional based approach to carrying out binding between a button click event, say, and a method on a view model. So not a big deal to have to put that in an interaction trigger in the XAML, but with Calibre Micro you would use the X name on a button, and that would automatically correspond by convention to a method on the view model, so there was just no need to write any code there. It also had quite a nice life cycle approach to if you inherit your view models from particular interfaces, then they are able to participate in life cycles such as deactivation and activation, which correspond to when the app itself is activated and deactivated. So this meant we were able to remove the sort of global app SAML code behind that you would normally tap into these lifecycle events at an application level and move them into, if you just want to do something, if the app closes in this particular page or this particular task, then it was much easier to apply that granular functionality. So it just had a little bit more, but very similar approach to automatically getting the view model bound to the presentation.
If someone were to go and use Calibre Micro on a new project,
Yeah.
any gotchas in terms of is it too big? Is it slow? Is there any performance implications of using it?
I think I did initially think that there might be issues with memory management with using. There's actually one particular thing is that Calibre Micro itself uses a dependency injection approach. There is one class, a bootstrapper class, where you wire everything up. There was one particular issue where, when you're using dependency injection, you can decide how you're going to have your objects instantiated. So for example, you can use a singleton approach just to make one for the entire application, where you can say, I want this object to be instantiated, and the view model itself to be instantiated on request. We found strangely that the singleton approach, this may have been changed, but the singleton approach did cause the application to slow down, and when we switched it to instance-based approach, it worked. So one recommendation is to use the instance-based approach, and I can't give you a scientific explanation as to why that is the case. So it's so much of gotcha there is also, yes, it is magical, and yes, it just applies these things, but you do have to, that bootstrapper class does, when you look at it, you need to, I guess, understand what's happening in terms of dependency injection, that there is a need to configure your application in that class such that it will then work properly.
So you can plug in your own IOC container into that as well.
Yeah.
So
but by default, it uses a very simple. It's actually called the simple IOC. It's its own codeplex, a simple container. There are other ones such as micro IOC, and other people have written ones. You can use Unity or Ninject, but they're probably a little bit of a heavier footprint for a mobile app. The simple container has worked for us. So yeah, there's no dependency on any particular framework there.
Did you have any particularly tricky issues you had to deal with? Can you tell us maybe what the hardest thing you had to solve was?
I thought that it would be something around things like push notifications or something where you would traditionally look at an app and think, oh, that's going to be hard. But it turned out to be control in the AlphaJack scheme. It turned out to be the Z indexing and the ability to scale the map, the board up and down, and have the tiles that were being placed on the board not actually go over clipping areas. So it was a mixture of a clipping. We couldn't use scroll viewer. We found that dragging in and out of a scroll viewer from a list box that was underneath, which is the rack area, was problematic. So that the actual page had to be rewritten, and we ended up using a canvas-based approach and a clipped rectangle, which introduced its own issues. So it was a mixture of the drag drop with clipping and Z indexing that probably was the largest chunk of work to perfect and get right, along with performance. So the actual game screen in AlphaJack's proved to require a bit of time. I mean, initially we made it with a nice big list box with 225 list items, which on the emulator just flew, and put it on a real device, and the actual binding time and the rendering for lots of items in a list box can prove to be a real drain on performance. So it's always at this stage, you know, on websites, you don't necessarily need to worry about the rendering time of a page, just in terms of how the control renders itself. But on mobile, you need to be very aware of that. So,
if you had one key tip for budding Windows Phone 7 developers, what would it be?
One key piece of advice would be to have fun. There's nothing that provides more fuel for ideas and growing your capabilities of the platform than actually having fun with it. It should feel like it's not work. Be patient with the platform as it matures, but experiment and have fun initially. Yes, the architecture is important. Yes, you will want to develop serious applications with an architecture, but think about your ideas, think about the type of apps that you want to build, and experiment with it.
And if devs are looking for advice, could they get hold of you? Where could they find you?
Yes, I'm available at very reasonable rates. New Zealand has a very favourable exchange rates at the present time. You can find me on Twitter at Patton, Kpatton, or markerstudio.com is my company blog. I may appear in various other places.
You've posted quite a few blog posts actually about some of the things you've been discovering along the way, haven't you?
Yeah, markerstudio.com/blog has got a tag Windows Phone 7, and we've got lots of stuff there about unit testing and just some of the bits and bobs that we've discovered in the last 6-7 months as we've developed the applications. So have a look there. Yeah, there's some quite good tips and tricks.
Cool, thanks Keith, thanks for your time. Good talking to you.